Come with me and we'll see what's the problem with injustice. Welcome to my series where I sit down and find something that I find mildly miffingly annoying, and I talk about it here on my channel, Comicstorian. Typically, you can find me going over audio dramas of your favorite comic books, but of course, this means that I read an excessive amount of comic books, and of course, that means I have a lot to nitpick about. Are you really a comic book nerd if you can't find one panel to rant and rave about? No, of course not. And today, we're going to tackle the giant subject, the giant problem known as injustice. We're going to talk about the game, the treatment of the comic books, the treatment of Superman, the convergence and the Jon Kent appearances, and everything else that has happened. But today's episode is brought to you by Keeps. Today's video is brought to you by Keeps. 2 out of 3 guys experience hair loss by the time they're 35. But Keeps is here to help stop hair loss and improve hair growth with their clinically proven and research-backed treatments. Keeps is an online subscription service that gives you quality, expert care without the need to go see a doctor or pharmacy because you get them delivered straight to your door. Don't worry, they also give you a full year of 24/7 unlimited messaging support so that you can connect with your medical provider about anything, anytime. If you aren't too worried about hair loss but want to keep your hair healthy, Keeps has an award-winning all-natural thickening shampoo and conditioner system. And Keeps has proven results with most customers, noticing results within 6 months of starting. So basically, Keeps has got you covered. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get a special offer, go to keeps.com/comicstorian or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/comicstorian. All right, now that we got the sponsorship out of the way, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of it. What is injustice, Benny? I've been hearing about it forever, and I've been living under a rock and don't know what injustice is. You fool. Let me explain it to you. Injustice is the concept of the DC universe going to war with each other. What I mean by that is, in the video game Injustice, which is what kicked off all of this, Joker found a way to basically trick Superman into killing Lois Lane. It was through fear gas and making him kill what he thought was Doomsday, but in fact, he was punching through Lois Lane. This drove Superman over the edge, and he became a militant dictator that was trying to basically conquer the world. Batman disagreed with him, and we basically had Superman's regime versus Batman's insurgents, and that was the fighting game. It was an excuse for our superheroes to be able to battle against each other because they wanted to make a fighting game in the vein of Mortal Kombat, but with your favorite superheroes. So we had to come up with excuses as to why that was happening. And what would make for an interesting fighting game antagonist? Well, Superman. It would make something that people would want to go buy. In this universe, Superman has gone evil, and Batman has to fight him. And we've come up with a serum to make everyone as strong as Superman. Almost. Just enough so that they can give a good, fair fight in a Mortal Kombat style arena. That's basically what it boiled down to. As a way to kind of amp this up, DC decided to do a prequel comic, setting the stage for the events that happen in the Injustice universe. Now, this original comic, I believe, was only supposed to be 12 issues. It was basically just covering the preemptive stuff leading up to the idea of injustice. It wasn't anything big. It wasn't even called Year One back in the day. It was just the Injustice prequel comic. It was your standard crappy tie-in for a video game. Something that 90% of the people would generally ignore, that no one would really read, and it didn't matter what they did with it. Well, that's when things got interesting. You see, they put Tom Taylor on it. And Tom Taylor, early in his career, was well known for basically doing tear-jerking, heartwarming moments and then taking them away and killing somebody. They put Tom Taylor on this book, and he wasn't really well known in the world of comic books at the time, and so he decided to just have fun with it. If you're writing a video game tie-in that you know 90% of the people aren't going to read, why not just have fun with it? And that's what he did. And the Injustice prequel comic turned out to not be trash, turned out to not be a bullshit video game tie-in. It turned out to be really, really good. Now, DC at this time wanted to really promote their digital comic books. Injustice, even though you may have bought it at your local comic book store, was released on their digital app. Well, it wasn't their digital app. It was actually released on Comicsology as their digital push. They had that. They had things like the Smallville, like season 11 was on there, and a few other things. So Injustice was pretty much the headline title on their digital releases. And then it would get a physical release later. So if you were reading the physicals, you were literally like 4 months behind or something crazy. So what ended up happening was Injustice did super well, and it kept going. They allowed Tom Taylor to turn it into, instead of just being an Injustice 12 issue prequel, a year thing. So it was year 1, year 2, year 3. And then as Tom Taylor moved on to other projects, they brought in other writers to continue it. And we went on until year 5. It was interesting. It was fun, but there was a lot of problems when you kind of expand the Injustice lore. And I want to talk about that. Now, first off, I'm a huge fan of the video game, and I'm a huge fan of the comic. I think that comic is incredible, but it has creative problems. And like I said, the first big one is Superman. Now, in the confines of a video game where we just need to come up with an excuse for our superheroes to fight, yeah, it works. Superman turned evil because Lois Lane was killed, and then we work out all the stuff. If you played the video game, it's mostly resolved by good Superman showing up and telling bad Superman what his problems were. And they kind of work it out, and they fight, and we beat the game, and the game's over, and bad Superman's captured in a prison. But when you stretch that out, you need to keep coming up with reasons why Superman is the antagonist, which would lead us down a path of going 5 years in world, which I think it was 5 years in real life too. Like, I don't remember how long year 1 through 5 went, but we needed to basically keep having Superman do things that were more and more evil. The issue boils down to Superman, the man of hope, the man who is supposed to save the day, the man who is trying to be a part of humanity, needs to keep not wanting to go back to his original roots. So we would have things going on, like people praising Joker, or people being against his militant nation that he had created, stuff like that. And it would just create a more out-of-character Superman as we went on. Now, in the long run, this worked out. Injustice is treated as an entirely separate iteration of the DC universe, to the point of we've dealt with them in other crossovers, which I'll get into. But at the time of this coming out, it created actually a big divide amongst the fans. There's the ones who loved the idea of Superman going evil and Batman trying to find a way to fight against Superman and basically dealing with that. But there was also a whole group of people who hated Injustice because in this world, Superman just keeps acting more and more out of character. And in order to make Superman act more and more out of character, we needed to have other characters act more and more out of character. Characters like Wonder Woman, who just wanted nothing but war. So we had to patch in more like alterations to her origin. Like she didn't have Steve Trevor around because she killed him. We had to do things like Barry Allen wanting to convert his friend Superman, but not wanting to get involved. So we had to tell more comic book stories why this would happen. This led to amazing storytelling, but as time went on, it created more and more out-of-character versions of the regime characters. It even created more out-of-character versions of like Batman, because as we're getting into like year 4 and 5, it was really boiling down to, why don't they just talk? Like just sit down and talk it out at this point, because we're just looking for excuses for things to go on. It was also causing problems because of the video game. You see, the video game was technically year 6. So in order to do that, they needed to make years 1 through 5 make sense with the video game. So they were always beholden to what happens in the video game. Now, I don't think initially they knew that they were going to go 5 years in this reality, which made it even more confusing because every year of Injustice had to have some big bombastic thing that Superman and Batman were fighting over. So we would go into like Trigon, we would go into Mr. Mxyzptlk, we would go fight against the Spectre. We would keep amping it up with every season of the comic to lead into the video game, which actually made it so that by the time we got to year 5, it was like, holy crap, stuff got insane, and now we're gonna go into multiverse? A little weird, but okay. But again, these are the problems with Injustice. You had to read it with the idea that this is just a separate universe, and it's just a lot of fun, and it eventually has to end. So let's just enjoy Injustice. Well, then Injustice 1 sold like gangbusters, and the comic books were selling like crazy, and they were leading the entire digital line. So of course we were going to get a sequel. So Injustice 2, the comic, didn't want to run into the same problems that Injustice 1, the comic, ran into. So they just kind of let it more free float. It was weird because Injustice 2 started up in 2017 and it went until after the release of Injustice 2. So it kind of bridged between the two games, and I think it also went a little after the two games. It was weird. And I think they did that intentionally because they're trying to break Injustice 2 as a comic series, make it truly become its own thing. But it's a little difficult when you've got a tie-in video game that is quite obviously a part of that lore. Injustice 2, the comic, went to the levels of checking in on Ra's al Ghul and how he felt about everything. We went into more obscure superheroes like Animal Man. And then we went into space with Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and the Green Lantern Corps and kind of did a lot more battles up there. Now, Injustice 2, the comic, I actually found it was, I want to say better than Injustice 1, the comic, but not for the reason you're thinking. Injustice 1, the comics issue was they didn't know how many seasons it was going. So every season or year is pretty self-contained where it could end with the beginning of Injustice 1, the video game. Injustice 2 didn't seem like it had that problem because it was just a nice ongoing narrative. So it's kind of how you want to take your Injustice. I liked the ongoing narrative more than I liked the condensed seasonal stuff, but you may just like the condensed seasonal stuff. But again, we continued on with the problem of Superman's not supposed to act that way. And as Injustice 2 continues onward, they've removed Superman mostly from the equation because of that problem. They were like, well, Superman's not going to act that way, and Superman's supposed to be in prison right now. Well, then Batman can deal with Ra's al Ghul. Batman can deal with the different lanterns. We're going to remove the threat of Superman because game-wise, Superman's been removed, so we need to let the comics do what happens afterwards in this universe of Injustice. Okay, interesting way to move on with our storyline. The problem is, Injustice's entire concept is Batman versus Superman. That's what it is. So even though we're in a fun universe, you know Injustice won the game for the ability to fight Batman against Superman. You know Injustice won the comic because of the ability to fight Batman versus Superman. So even though Injustice 2 was great and fun and it explored this universe beyond the Superman conflict, we then had to deal with it ending because there's no Injustice 3, the game. Now, it's been 5 years since the end of Injustice, and it's almost pretty much accepted that there will eventually be an Injustice 3, the video game, and of course, we will get an Injustice 3 tie-in comic book, and it will continue the universe of Injustice. And it's going to have its own plot holes and problems. It's going to have issues with Superman being evil, Superman just not listening to people, and stuff like that. But that brings us to the next issue with Injustice. DC doesn't want you to forget Injustice was a thing. There's been 2 major crossovers with the Injustice universe. The first of which was Convergence, in which the Injustice universe was destroyed. So we can kind of ignore that one because it was basically Superman versus Talos. It was weird, and he disappeared after the event was over, so who cares? But Talos, whatever his name was, killed Superman, killed the universe, whole universe died. But we have a more recent one. And this is where the problem really does come in. Now, Injustice 2 having its issues with characters and them not acting in character and them all acting weird, we can all attribute to being an alternate universe that you're going to like or you're going to hate. It's tied into a video game, so characters need to act weird to make it so we're all fighting. Cool. I can chalk all of that up. That's fine. But in 2023, we had a series called The Adventures of Jon Kent, Superman. And The Adventures of Jon Kent, Superman sent him into the multiverse. He went into the multiverse where he teamed up with a different Superman. I want to say Calvin Ellis. I think that was the one. And Lois Lane Red Tornado. Their job was to hunt down Ultraman. Ultraman was a villain going through the multiverse to kill other Supermen. And it was an interesting premise because Jon Kent was tortured by Ultraman all the way back in like 2018 or something like that. So it was like, oh, cool. If you've been following the Jon Kent from a kid aged up to current age, and you've been following what's been happening with that, well, it's going to be interesting to see the two of them finally fighting it out. During this, Jon Kent has gained insane Super Saiyan powers where he can turn into Blue Lightning Superman and like go all in and just slug people with this crazy power. Cool. The premise is sound, but they tagged something on there to make you read it. The Road to Injustice. Now, it was then hyped up that Jon was going to go to the Injustice universe. Interesting, because we're going to see the son of Superman dealing with a Superman who's acting out of character. Cool. I'm interested in seeing where this is going. Now, I have my own theories, just like I have my theories of what happened with Injustice, and I just went over, but I have my own theories of what happened to Jon Kent. Jon Kent Superman came out, sold like crazy, and then as people were getting tired of Jon Kent headlining the Superman book, sales began to plummet. We had to bring back Superman, Clark Kent, which we did, but now we've got Superman, Jon Kent, and we don't want to get rid of him. So they regulated him off to being in the backup of the Action Comics book, and they decided that his book would now become The Adventures of Jon Kent in order to get people interested in a book entitled Jon Kent as opposed to kind of baiting you before. If you don't know, Jon Kent was the headline of the Superman book. It was titled Superman, but it was also kind of baity because you were like, I want to read Superman, and then you pick it up and you're like, Superboy? What? That was kind of it if you weren't tracking what's going on. So I feel like the decision was have him go to Injustice to use Injustice to sell the Jon Kent comic. What happened in the story proves my theory. So what happened is, issue 2, they track down Ultraman. Ultraman is beating up Jon. Jon goes super powerful, hits Ultraman. Ultraman then wins out that fight and then dies because Injustice Superman shows up and snaps his neck like a twig. Okay, so you bait and switched us by telling us we were going to get resolution to Ultraman's storyline, and you kind of did, but we didn't get to see Jon's reaction to that. And then you immediately went, and now he meets his evil version of his dad, or the evil version, grammar's a thing I do, the evil version of his dad. Okay, I'm on board with this. Now, we all thought originally this was going to be a continuation to the Injustice universe. A way for DC to take Injustice, bring it into the main timeline of a multiverse, maybe eventually even the multiverses fight, or we see more crossover, or things like that. Nope, none of that is what happens. We discover that Jon is like in the middle of Injustice 1, so he's somewhere in year 1 through 6. So it's not going to be like in canon ever. We then have Jon go around the Injustice universe to see how bad things really have gotten. We have Jon acknowledge that Superman and Wonder Woman are not acting like themselves. They're not the Superman and Wonder Woman that he knows. We have him acknowledge that Barry kind of wants to be a part of it, but doesn't it? Jon is literally the audience reading Injustice the entire time we're reading Injustice. He's just going around pointing out the flaws. And I have a theory on that. I feel like most of the stuff that went weird with Injustice wasn't Tom Taylor's idea. It was DC mandating it or the other writers. So this is Tom Taylor writing Jon Kent, having Jon Kent go around his own universe being like, nope, weird, what happened? It was like Tom Taylor calling out the stuff that he didn't like that was done in Injustice and that he had to come back and kind of half fix. That's a theory, run with it if you want to. But the story then turns into Jon Kent realizes he needs to stop Superman. Okay, cool. All right, where are we just going to do an alternate timeline where Jon goes to fight Superman and then fixes the Injustice universe? This would be an interesting idea because right now, Jon Kent is a redundancy in the Superman lore. Superman, Connor, Supergirl, Power Girl, and Jon all have the same power set. So you know it's an amazing idea? Jon Kent lost in the multiverse, fixing problematic universes like Injustice. That is an amazing idea that they don't do. So Jon goes to Superman, calls him out for being not right, tells the world that they shouldn't be following Superman, tells Superman that you need to stand against this and you need to realize what's going on, and then gets blasted in the back by Cyborg, getting sent back home. The actual fight was Jon using all of that crazy Super Saiyan power to go hug Superman. Now, I said it in the video. I actually liked that resolution because you didn't see it coming. That's why I liked that resolution. I thought Jon was going to go slug Superman and we'd get a big fight and it'd be cool. But to see Jon take a different route was interesting, and it was in character for Jon, and I feel like it worked. What doesn't work is before we see how any of that resolves, they move Jon. Like, cool, you're trying something else. You look like you're getting through to evil Superman. Could we see an alternate timeline of Injustice where things are corrected? Could we see Injustice be in the mainline Superman universe? Could we see some cool possibilities? No, we see none of that. We see Jon go and hug Superman, and then zippity-doo-dah, he's back on the mainline universe. Apparently after Night Terrors, because the book even says, check out Jon in Beast World. We're not even at Beast World. What's Beast World? I don't even know. Now you're probably wondering, how is this a problem with Injustice? Mini rant about Jon and his journey to Injustice aside, my problem with Injustice is that DC won't let it just die. We've created a situation where Injustice needs to continue in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if it's a WB mandate in order to keep the relevance of Injustice going so that we can have Injustice 3. Comics are still doing well. I don't know if it's DC just being like, hey, what was one of the highest selling books in the last 10 years? Oh, it's an entire multiverse universe that we've been expanding upon. Keep expanding. But somebody at DC has decided that Injustice needs to continue. Now, I feel like Jon Kent's story would be better if it was taking place after all of the Injustice lore that has been built up. But now we're stuck with a weird possibility. What if we're going to be ignoring every bit of Injustice lore past, say, year 1? What if Tom Taylor's idea, and the reason why this is entitled The Road to Injustice, is that we're going to get an Injustice timeline comic book that is ongoing? What if the idea now is to just retcon everything that they ended up doing? And even if it's not, what if Injustice just becomes the thing that they use to get you to buy comic books? Now, I won't lie. Anytime there's anything even implying injustice, I put it in a title on a YouTube video to get you to click the video. You know why? Because if I see anything that says injustice, I want to know what's going on. So I know there's a lot of you that want to do the same thing. I do pride myself on not faking you out. If it involves injustice, I can put it in the title and I will let you know what it involves. But that doesn't change the fact that I also use it as a clickbait title. And I feel like that's the problem with Injustice. It is so popular that people love it or hate it. It doesn't matter. It's so popular that it's now becoming used to sell comics. And what we're getting are half-assed attempts at stories that don't resolve. That's the biggest issue with the Jon Kent Injustice storyline. It doesn't resolve. Jon Kent gives a rousing speech, seems to get through to Superman, and that's the end of it. We don't know. Is Superman mad at Cyborg for sending Jon back? Is Superman going to listen to Jon and try to work it out with Batman? Are we going to tear apart the regime? Is Superman just going to go back to the way things were, but occasionally question what's going on with Jon? What about Lex Luthor's hand in this whole thing? How is that going to be changed with the main storyline? What's going on with Batman and Harley Quinn, who are arrested and then talk to Superman? What's happening with all these characters? Because you set up a lot of interesting possibilities, and there's no solicit for a continuation. Solicits are normally about 6 weeks out or more. So if there was going to be a continuation to the Injustice universe, we would generally know about it right now. Another running theory was that we were going to hear about Injustice 3 at EVO. EVO is over, hence me making the video. We did not hear about Injustice 3. If you don't know what EVO is, it's the yearly big world championship for fighting games. So a lot of things such as Injustice 3 or Mortal Kombat 1 get their reveals at these things. So that's really what it boils down to. Injustice is an onion of problems. It really is. Because when you break it down, the lore doesn't start matching up. The lore doesn't line up to the video games, but it's supposed to. Many characters act out of character, from Superman to Wonder Woman to Hercules. I'll even throw random ones out there. Hercules during the arc where he challenged against Wonder Woman. Like, stuff just, the new gods, none of this makes sense. Which worked because you just chalked it up to being different. But now DC wants to remind you how out of character things are. To make Jon's situation worse, he literally called out things that acted out of character, like I said. So what they're doing is literally pointing out the problems themselves. And then they just leave it. It's just left hanging. Dan's theory is that immediately following warping Jon Kent back to the main universe to deal with whatever the hell Beast World is, Superman punched Cyborg's head off. I like to think that that's accurate. But what do you think the problems with Injustice are? I'm a longtime fan of the Injustice universe, but I do take it for, this isn't Superman, this isn't Wonder Woman. They are acting very out of character, but that's what makes the universe, like, interesting. Because Superman's practically Homelander in that universe. He really is. I mean, he's just not as crazy. I feel at this point, let's just put him all the way over the edge. Let's make him Homelander. Let's have him have weird fetishes and stuff like that. Let's go straight boys with this. It'll be totally awesome and wonky as weird. If we're doing this, let's go all in. That's just my thought. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, Keeps, and I will see you next week with another problem with video. Actually, we're not going to do problem with video next week. We are not. I am announcing it here. You all tell me you find the problem with titles to be too negative. So we're going to try something, and this is your shot to show me that I can make these commentary videos and they don't got to be titled problem with. We're doing Marvel versus DC, and I'm going to go through the pros and cons of reading each and how you get involved in each and what I find to be interesting and uninteresting about both. Okay? And we're going to title it Marvel versus DC. And if it doesn't get views, I'm blaming you, Fred. All right. Don't forget to sign up over at YouTube memberships for early access. Join us over at Patreon. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if I forgot any other bullshit that all of us YouTubers have to say at the ending of every video, you've heard it somewhere else, and please do that as well. I'll see you next time.